Each year, the diversity in the workforce increases, with more women entering more professional positions that require high levels of education. Despite having the education and experience required, women are still fighting the force that is the gender wage gap. But where did it all start? Though it was not the first time a wave of women entered the workforce, from 1940 to 1945, around 5 million women entered the workforce for the first time.
So if we're going to be successful in a war, somebody's got to be building the bombers and making the guns and making the uniforms and, making the food supplies for the soldiers. The US government had a war board that created all kinds of outreach to women, posters, newsreels that were shown in movie theaters, encouraging them to take these jobs and promising them a new set of skills, that they would learn skills that would be useful to them after the war. They also promised them that they would earn a man's wages.
Some Americans would argue that all of that was in the past, and the gender wage gap and discrimination against women no longer exist.
The gender wage gap, basically in the simplest terms, refers to the difference in pay that women receive as compared to white men. And they're compared to white men because white men are at the top of the social hierarchy, the top of the economic hierarchy, generally make the highest wages as an aggregate.
You can actually look at what the pay gap is generally, and then also by different industries.
The length of this gap is measured by comparing the wages of women and men completing the same job under the same hours. When you break the wage gap down into racial statistics, it's even more shocking.
For example, white women may earn 80 cents on the dollar for every dollar a man earns, but black women make 62 cents. Latino women make 54 cents, and Native American women make 57 cents.
An interesting characteristic of the gender wage gap is the gap seems to get larger with higher levels of education. According to the Economic Policy Institute, this is in part likely reflects labor market policies that foster more equal outcomes for workers in the low tier of the wage distribution. This all starts from early stages of life when women are discouraged from participating in the sciences, maths, politics, and are steered more towards gender-abiding jobs. Recently, more and more women are starting to work in higher-paying jobs such as doctors and lawyers, and they are becoming the majority of the people that hold these positions. But especially in these fields, men are still making more money. This sends the message that a man's work is deemed more valuable in these workplaces.
So the number that exists that can't be explained is still somewhere between 7 and 12%. And that's true according to AAUW, the American Association of University Women. That 7% wage gap starts out first thing a year out of college for college-educated women and college-educated men, and that's controlling for virtually every factor.
I've definitely had conversations with people who have talked about how it's more important for men to get paid more because they have more responsibilities. It's as if women working is a luxury for them.
Another experience that uniquely affects women is pregnancy and childbirth. After giving birth, women are paid less than both male and female peers. When a man becomes a father, there does not seem to be any deduction in his pay.
Mothers are doubly penalized because of the perception that they won't want promotions that require travel because they have children, so they just don't get offered those jobs rather than offer it to them and let them decide for themselves. There's just a sort of a perception of mothers and mothers' needs that in many cases perpetuates the pay gap for them.
Equal pay would significantly reduce poverty and allow more families to have financial stability. The status of women in the state suggests that equal pay would cause the poverty rate in working women to fall below half if women earn the same as men. They also say that state and international economies would grow if the gender pay gap no longer existed.
In terms of realistically, what I think works is a law very much like what we have here in Massachusetts. And the first is that employers cannot prohibit you from discussing your salary with your coworkers. That's how you keep the gender pay gap in place. If you can't talk about it, you can't discover that you're making less.
One of the things that is really important to do in any organization or institution is to be doing salary audits, really looking at and making sure that there's equity in the way that people are paid.
According to the Census Bureau, 4 million women over 65 years old are living in poverty. But if they had equal pay, more than 2.5 million children with working single mothers would be lifted out of poverty. These are just a few examples of how systemic bias against women is expressed in America.
If the steps to closing or even just narrowing the wage gap are easier and more simple than we make them out to be, there is no reason why the president-elect can't work to make that 80 cents for every dollar a man makes turn into 85 and then 90. All progress matters as long as we are working to create equality in the workplace.